Hi everyone, and thanks for being with me. I don't know how many people will get online today, but I'm hoping it's a few because the two topics that I plan to talk about today are particularly important and they're topical. They're issues that I think should concern all of us. The first topic that I wish to have a conversation with you about is immigration policy and whether or not you support, whether you do or whether you don't, support the rallies on the weekend in relation to immigration. Now, I've done a few posts on that over the last few days, and I certainly won't endeavour to reiterate the things that I've already posted about and those things that perhaps some of you have already acknowledged and viewed. But what I will do is try and talk about it a little bit differently. But before I start all of that, I'd like to think you could subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications, because it's here at the Tony Tonkin Show that I plan to give you the facts, the best facts that I can. And I need to say around that what I do is endeavour to research the topics that I'm going to talk about, endeavour to write a script about all of those. Good day, pseudo-intellectual. Good day, buddies. Good to you, male or female. It's good to know that you're here. And thanks for those people that have joined the stream already. So I wish to have a conversation with you about that first issue, which is immigration, how you view immigration, what sort of... And one of the issues that seems to be all-pervading for me actually is in relation to, do we want immigration? Do we not want immigration? Does immigration serve any specific purpose? And what is it that if we were to cut immigration, what would we cut it to? And what levels would be appropriate given the types of people that immigration is supposed to target? So I'd like to have a conversation with you as best as I can. It means that they're not white. Yeah, well, that's part of the issue. So so thanks for that. I'm going to talk a little bit about, and I'd like you to participate in this conversation. This is the reason why I do a live feed on Tuesday. So Tuesday is my live feed on my own, having a chat to you. Hi, JP. Thanks for joining us again. But I want us to have an intellectual conversation, a conversation whereby we're bandering around ideas as opposed to hyperbole or trying to discuss things that are inane, that don't make sense, that are leading themselves either to the right or to the left in terms of politics, but some practical solutions about the issues that we're confronting with. And that's what I plan to do with immigration today. So please participate in this conversation because it promises to be an interesting one. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment, my view on immigration, and I'll probably sort of revisit some of the posts that I did in the last few days. The second thing that I want to talk about is Trump dead? I did a post on that it must have been Saturday or thereabouts, and I'm grateful for the fact that it has in excess of 13,000 views at the moment. And it rated so highly, I think, primarily for me, because I was talking about something that I guess everybody had been thinking about, but no one had really at that particular point, not that I could see anyway, had articulated in a way which made us think about where is Trump, what has happened to him. So I want to talk about that in the second part of our session today. So join with me, have a conversation. There's quite a few people online at the moment and wish to have a conversation about those 2 points, immigration, what it means. Did you attend the rally on the weekend or any of the rallies held around Australia? What is your view around the extreme right and the Nazism that we saw at those rallies? I've got lots of questions. And one of the reasons for that is that I'm a social worker by profession, so asking questions is kind of what I do. And so if you could answer any of those questions for me, it would be absolutely fabulous. And I do suggest participate and have a conversation. So where do I sit around immigration? Well, immigration, let's start from the beginning. we are a nation of immigrants. There's no way of disputing that. You can't say that we're not. We're not a European country which has had people dominating it and taking it over and controlling it and committing all sorts of horrific murders in those countries. Even though we in this country don't have a very positive history in terms of the way we've treated Indigenous people. So where we have murdered and slaughtered First Nations people, a part of our history for which we should not be proud, but certainly part of our history which we need to acknowledge. However, we also, we are a nation. We are no longer a nation of convicts, but we used to be a nation of convicts. Convicts came here first, along with soldiers and those people that had brought them here. So I think that we need to start looking at our history more realistically and at least recognise one simple fact. If we're not going to talk about anything else, let's talk about the simple fact that 3% of the population is First Nation. They were here to start with. The second part of the fact, I guess, is that everybody else came from somewhere else. And so we are a country which is full of immigrants. That's who we are, and to some extent, that's not true. Not to some extent. That is our culture. So when people talk about, that we should be celebrating the Australian culture, I often wonder, well, what in the hell does that mean? What part of Australian culture are we going to be celebrating? Are we going to be celebrating Indigenous culture, their acceptance and understanding and appreciation of the land? Is that what we're supposed to be celebrating? Are we celebrating that part of our heritage? Or are we celebrating the macho Australian, bronzed, sunbaked, surfing sort of Australian? Is this a sort of person that we should be celebrating? Are we celebrating the digger, the Anzac, the person that's fought in wars? Are we supposed to be celebrating the courage and determination that we identify with Australians? Are we celebrating the fact that we are a progressive nation, that we were the first people to, I think second to New Zealand, to have universal voting, and for the first women to vote, and to have the first woman stand in a parliament was in South Australia? These are things that we are to celebrate, that part of our history. But I think when people talk about the type of Australia that they believe we should be, that really what they're talking about on the whole is a white Australian. So, an Australian where we expect, so the other word that I hear often, and we'll talk about this briefly, is the other word I hear quite strongly offered is that that people should be assimilating. Now I don't know whether that means that we should be assimilating to First Nations people, and maybe that's not a bad idea, that we should be considering a little bit more about First Nations languages and whether or not we should better understand them as well as their culture. Is that something we should be doing? Or is it about assimilating to what the people determine as the Australian culture, which is the white Christian culture that is based on the British heritage and excludes, in fact, all other sort of ethnic backgrounds and religions? Is that really where we should be going with all of this? So what are your thoughts? I've got some thoughts up here at the moment, and I'll refer to them in just a second. We'll go through them. But what do you think? What is the Australian culture? How can we best define it? And the people that argue that we're not, that we haven't met this bar, whatever it is, around the Australian culture, who often, I've never heard anybody articulate what that culture is. We've got Bob Katter up there and Pauline Hanson and these crazy politicians talking about the fact that we've got this beautiful Australian culture and we're a wonderful country and all this sort of shit, and we don't. No one's articulating specifically what that culture is, and I find it extremely frustrating because how in the hell can we start to have an argument about our culture if you cannot adequately articulate what it is? Because I think if you start to articulate that the culture is about being white, being Christian, being non-Indigenous, then I think you're heading down a track which is going to create an argument which you will never win because you'll be clearly identified as a racist. And many of these people that talk about this issue couch it in, well, I'm not a racist. I don't disagree with immigration. Immigration is fine. It's just that there are some issues around immigration. For example, as I heard somebody say yesterday, that we should be careful of immigration simply because there are too many Indians coming into the country. And I think, well, I guess the Aboriginal First Nations people must have been thinking, who are these strange people arriving on these incredible-looking vessels, and what are they doing here? And they're not part of our culture, and perhaps we should kick them out because they're invading our country. Well, that never happened. And yet, on the other hand, we're now saying that there are people from other countries like India and China and Asia, and they're invading our country because they look different to us. And they're not assimilating into the Christian society, pseudo-Christianism, because they're not assimilating because they have a different religious belief. And I find those notions horrific. That we are so, we couch ourselves and we talk about ourselves as being a tolerant society. There are a few realities here that come out from these rallies on the weekend. Number one is we're not tolerant. Far from it. That we are not non-racist because we are racist. We are a racist nation. And our history tells us that. And then these immigration rallies tell us that as well. And as a result of all of that, we find ourselves we'll find people like myself having to have arguments and to have conversations with people and try to put the point forward that we need to be able to have reasonable conversations. But you can't have reasonable conversations with people who declare that their view is the only view that is right, and that view is about people that are non-white, non-Christian, settling into our society, so it's never theirs, it's always ours, and that they're unable to settle in simply because they refuse to assimilate, which means they just want to maintain their own beliefs, their own cultures, and so on. The fact that we are, the culture that we have, and I've argued this many, many times, is that we're a multiculture. Multi means many. We are not one culture. We are many cultures all mixed together. And I did say in one of my posts a day or so ago that my son lived in Hurstville, and it's an interesting place because it's in Sydney. It's in must be southern suburbs, maybe northern suburbs. Pardon me, and you walk down the street, the main street in Hurstville, and it's just full of Asian people, or people from Korean backgrounds, Chinese backgrounds, whatever. It's the most fabulous place. The food is great, and it's just wonderful to me. When I walk amongst all those people down that street, I can do nothing but celebrate how wonderful Australia is. That we've included these people from other countries that have decided to come to Australia because they could see a completely different future for them from wherever they came from. And they have adopted Australia. I don't think they've adopted necessarily Australian values in terms of whatever those Australian values are and the failure of people to articulate what they are anyway. But they've come here because there is a sense of freedom and opportunity. That's what Australia offers. And if anything, that is our values that we should be celebrating, that we should be offering to others, that we are here to celebrate. Someone says, have you seen the film Barbacura? No, I haven't. That's pseudo-intellectual. Thanks, mate. They want to go back to some time they think was better, don't acknowledge the reason. So I'll bring that up. That's M. Beach. Thank you very much. So if I can bring that up. So that they want to go back to some time they think was better, but don't acknowledge the reason it was good was because of the tax rates in the 50s, 60s and 70s. I haven't thought of that argument either. So that makes sense, I guess. And yeah, what do they want to go back to? And I think, and it's an interesting point because we hold these glossy views, and I will follow that through. That was a good point because, and it wasn't about the tax rates, is that older people tend to think that back in the 50s and 60s, where I came from, that was a better time. It was an interesting time. It was a challenging time. And particularly the late 60s, early 70s, when Gough Whitlam came to power, and the social changes that Gough brought about, and how they were received by the other side of politics was one of fear. I can remember, a bit of a sideline, but I can remember my father, who was a Liberal Party member and attempted to stand for the Liberal Party on a few occasions. And I must confess, and I haven't said this often, if at all, on any of these posts, I had a very right-wing bent to the way I viewed the world back in my early 20s. And it wasn't until I went to university when I was 35 that I started to change some of those views because I realised how racially orientated they actually were. But I can remember my father saying when Whitlam won power that would be, it was like he was saying that was the end of the world, that the things and the policies that Whitlam brought in would destroy us all, right? It wasn't the case. That there was this fear. So there's this, and this is what I found, I thought I felt in the immigration rallies, was there was this fear of change, that somehow there was change in the wind, that we were encouraging. It's like somebody woke up and looked around themselves and went to Hurstville or whatever and noticed all these Asian people all of a sudden and started to think, they're taking us over, whatever the us is, that they're different from us. They have different values and different principles and whatever, and they look different to us. Therefore, they're a threat, because as my father saw it back in the early 70s, he saw it as a threat to how he viewed the world and what was important to him. And today, so my question, the other question I want to ask you too, is how do you deal with the arguments that these people put forward, given that they are not factual? So I did a post this morning, which I hope most of you had at least had an opportunity to watch, and it highlighted the idea that, so I was looking at the idea, if Australia had net zero, what would that mean? If we didn't have any immigration whatsoever, how would that impact us? And the reality is it would impact us so negatively that our GDP would decline, productivity would decrease, we wouldn't be able to build houses, and we wouldn't have the professions that we need in this country to come into this country, simply because that our net zero population, that our population growth is net zero. It's more people of my age and beyond are dying. The largest, the baby boomers, they're dying. So that was when the population increased significantly. And that was when we also, after the war, the Italians and Germans and Europeans came to Australia in particular, Hungarians and then Lebanese. So a lot of people came to Australia And there was this baby boom. So all these kids were born, whatever, and the population grew incredibly. And now the population's declining. So what does that mean? Does that mean we become so isolationist that we refuse to accept other people coming to this country? And what does that mean to us economically? Well, it'll be a disaster, because our fourth largest export, if you like, and it is referred to as an export, is education. So we have all these people that come to Australia from China and Asia and other parts of the world because we have great universities, we have a good lifestyle. Often these people find menial jobs that they do to support themselves while they're at uni, and they contribute back to the economy because they pay taxes. So, and they provide services. And one of the most disappointing things I've heard for a long, long time was actually Peter Credlin. I also posted this on my last post that I did this morning. Peter Credlin had the gall to say that people come over here and get pointless degrees. They don't. A lot of the people that come here that get, science degrees and social work degrees like mine and other degrees, and engineering degrees, those and medical degrees, those people who come here to study often find ways to stay here as well. So they're investing in us in Australia by paying for their fees, and they're further investing in us by staying and maintaining that expertise in this country. So immigration is really, really important. And if we cut it out, then we're diminishing our gross national product, GDP rather, and we're also diminishing the sense of multiculturalism that we have. So what do you think? Add these comments. I've got stacks of comments here. I'm going to start to go through them. Elizabeth Cook says, yes, there are two strains of human, those that are risk takers and those that don't like change, hence the left and the right. I'll put that up there, Elizabeth, for people to mull over, and maybe people could think about this. And those that don't like change, hence the left and the right. So I think you're saying there, Elizabeth, that there are people on both sides who don't like change, and I don't disagree with that notion, actually, that people want the status quo, and because we have a Labor Party in, which is more progressive than what the Liberals would be, that we want to maintain that as well, but we need to be taking risks. Life, frankly, Elizabeth, is all about risks. Even me doing this video right now is about risks, because I never know how many people I'm going to get online, if any. I never know what the conversation is going to be about. And believe me, before I go online, I find it a very nerve-wracking experience, wondering what in the hell I'm going to be talking about. But I've been talking now for 24 minutes, which surprised me. I didn't realise that. So what else do you have to say? I'll go through. Migration isn't an issue. I think it's referring to JP. So JP says, yes, there are two strands of humans. Those that are that's the one I said before. I don't know why that one came up. I'll try and re-evaluate all of that. Two strands of, yes, right. And then JP says these protests should be a wake-up call. Oh, I didn't get rid of it. These people don't want others, JP. These people should be a wake-up call for our pollies to address the issues of migration. Okay, let's start with that, JP. I'll see if I can bring it up here without stuffing it up. Let's start with that issue. Should be a wake-up call for our pollies to address the issues of immigration. All right, JP, I want you to tell me what the issues are. And anybody else? What are the issues around immigration? And someone raised this issue with me the other day, And I had to think about, can you describe, when we look at immigration, and governments have policies, believe it or not, it isn't random. It isn't about saying, hey, send us a visa application and we'll let you through. It's about ticking a whole lot of boxes to make sure that you meet a whole stack of criteria before you come to this country, including an ASIO assessment. So they filter you. They kind of can interrogate you if need be, if they think you're questionable. So what does it mean that, what are the issues around migration? We need to talk about that. And if you can offer me some comments, JP, around what do you mean and what do others mean as well, please let me know, because immigration is something that we must have. We cannot survive without it. And if we do have to have it, what should it look like if it shouldn't look like what it looks like now? And the other issue too, which is a primarily concern for me, is that so many people are arguing that that immigration represents a challenge to our sense of democracy, whatever that might mean to them, and our social cohesion. And then we have more and more people becoming divisive. And politicians and Sky News in particular take up this issue and say, well, okay, we're going to challenge all of this stuff that you're talking about, and that we're going to ensure that we're going to divide the population even more. We're going to put up arguments, as Peter Credlin did last night, on issues which are not well thought out or argued, and they're often devoid of fact. And so my goal is to be able to have a conversation with you which actually is more factual. Okay, so, Baron, thanks for that. So we've got some here from Baron. I'll bring that up if I can. Oops, wrong one. Can't do that again. I don't know why it does that. But Baron says, limited new housing supply. Okay, let's tackle that one. Limited new housing supply, restrictive zoning and planning, high construction costs and labour shortages, easy credit and low interest rates, and widening wealth inequality. So I'm assuming, Baron, you're saying that housing supply is an issue, because now you could use these same arguments in relation to why we need migration. So we need migration for people to build the houses. That's one thing. The amount of migration that actually impacts housing itself is about 3 or 4%. So it's not very high anyway. Restrictive zoning and planning. So there needs to be some issues around getting rid of some red tape. No one's denying that at all. High construction costs and labour shortages. And I guess tariffs are probably not helping in that area either. Easy credit card and low interest rates is certainly an issue, not disputing that. And widening wealth inequality is another problem. These are all problems, most of which I agree with, but how are they impacting inflation? What's the reason for that? All right, that's pretty much what you're saying. Okay, thanks, Baron, I appreciate that. So Sky News and neo-Nazis. So the other issue, okay. One of the other issues around the rally was that it was organised by the extreme right, and it was organised by members of the Nazi movement. Now, I'm not suggesting that if you participated in the rally, you were a neo-Nazi. But I am suggesting that if you attended the rally and you yelled and screamed when they shouted their mantras to you, then you were participating and giving legitimacy to a racist white supremacist group. And look, I thought of attending the rally here in Adelaide to do some videos of it, to see what actually was happening, because I was interested. And I guess there are many people that did. But there were so many people I also noticed that had Australian flags and were dressed with Australian. So they dressed to prepare to come to a rally around immigration without offering, I don't think, and the people that I saw interviewed on television had no idea really as to what arguments they could put forward in relation to immigration. It was extremely disappointing. But that's what people did. So could people still offer me? I'm still asking the same question. Yeah, that's right. Sean, thanks for raising that. So Sean here has said that, no, that's still the wrong one. Didn't come up, so I don't know what I'm doing here. So Sean has said, though, lots of migrants relocate to regional areas where no one wants to live. And that's the other reason why migration is important as well. World War II diggers fought and lost lives fighting the Nazis. Now they are welcoming, well, I don't know how many World War II diggers would be celebrating the Nazis, to be quite frank with you, JP. Not very many. But yeah, certainly, why has the Nazi movement even got a hold here in Australia? It's primarily because there are still white racists in our environment, and we must do what we can to stand up against them, not support them by attending rallies. Would probably be a damn good start. So I'll be interested in your comments. Have a conversation about immigration and what it actually means. That would be fabulous. The final thing I wanted to talk about was my post I did last week, which raised some eyebrows, and it was concerning US politics. And I don't know whether people really care, but apparently a lot of people on Twitter cared about whether Donald Trump was dead or not. And there were people that were celebrating, in fact, the thoughts that perhaps he had passed away. And I wasn't one of those. Don't want to see anyone die unnecessarily. But I certainly was interested in what would happen if Trump not only not passed away, but what would happen if someone took over from Trump. And I've been saying this for a long, long time, is that the United States is heading towards a civil war. That there's no way in the world I can see such a divided nation surviving Trump leaving, given that Trumpism is fully ingrained, baked in to the way a lot of Americans, a fair percentage, not all of them, fair enough, I accept that, and maybe that's a blessing, but certainly the fact that so many Americans see or view the United States as a country that should be and could be autocratically run, and that the democracy in their particular system could fail. And what would that mean to the rest of us? And, as Barron says, J.D. Vance, J.D. Vance, I think, in many ways would be worse than Donald Trump, primarily because he's far more articulate, but because he's just as evil, I think, if not more so, and crueler. And that the United States, I think, is, regardless of whether Trump's there or not, is heading down a pathway which will mean their total destruction. And as a result of that, I think it's sad because the Democrats themselves have proved to be so fatless that they haven't been able to manifest a challenge against Donald Trump in any meaningful way. Apart from Gavin Newsom, AOC and Bernie Sanders, there seems to be very few that seem to be taking the fight up to Donald Trump. And that means that the rest of the world will find itself in a situation whereby we have to choose. Now, the United States has been a pretty stable a pretty stable friendship, I guess, and that the United States has been reliable in terms of its friendship. And the reliability, though, has mainly been about other countries fawning at the feet of the US. Other countries, particularly Australia, choosing to go and fight in battles that were started and created by the United States. One would have think that we would have learnt from Vietnam, but we haven't. And we seem to think that because they are the most powerful nation on this planet, and that they used to have the greatest financial sway of any country, that they bought more shit than anybody else, that somehow we had to give in to them. And I think those times are changing. That Europe and India and China in particular are looking for other places in which to trade, because the United States under Trump is no longer reliable. And I think that even if Trump wasn't there, that would still be the case, that we could never rely on the United States again. It would be, and the other problem I think there is around things like AUKUS, where we're spending, billions of dollars on a program which will never be delivered to us simply because the United States haven't got enough space or ingenuity, or they haven't got enough of anything in order to build their own ships, let alone build them for us. And I noticed just recently that we've got a whole lot of frigates we're asking to be built by the Japanese. Who would have thought that the Japanese are building our frigates? Is it because we couldn't ask Britain to do it because they're too busy sort of sucking up to the US, or we couldn't ask the US to do it because they're so unreliable? So we have decided to have them made elsewhere. And made, apparently, ahead of time, given what the time frame would have been. Certainly you couldn't have asked the US to do it because they can't make enough for themselves. So the world is changing. Is that a good or a bad thing? Do people celebrate the fact that Trump is isolating us, says Sean? Yeah. Well, I think, this is an interesting point. I think we should isolate ourselves from the United States. I get really irritated by Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong when you see them continually sucking up. And JP brought up BRICS nations, which is important as well. And a powerful bloc too, the BRICS nations are, I hasten to add, JP. And should we join them? There are a whole lot of countries, apart from Britain, Russia, India, China and South Africa, that have joined up with BRICS. So, and yes, should we join up with them? Is the political the type of government that governs your country, which is in China, communism, in India, need I say it, a pseudo-democratic society, largest democracy in the world, but under Modi, is it all that democratic is the real issue, and other countries such as South Africa and Brazil and others. Should we all join together to form an alliance that isolates even further the United States? I think that's a trend, and I think that's a place that we all should start to consider going to, because at the end of the day, they are no longer reliable, and frankly, to put it bluntly, they're no longer our friend. When you look, because when I look at Trump, I see somebody who's just totally, and everybody says this anyway, he's totally transactional. So a transactional relationship means that as long as you're doing transactions that they agree with, you will be so-called friend, or you'll be worthwhile, or you'll be valuable. But once you choose to be non-transactional, when you say no to somebody who wants to be transactional, immediately you won't be his friend or her friend. They will isolate you. In fact, they'll often do what Trump does, which is berate you, put you down, as he did with Zelensky, and he did with the South African president. So there are certain ways, I believe, that we could start to confront Trumpism, and that's simply by ignoring him. and making statements. And, I think European countries, apart from Brazil, and Canada, incidentally, have at least made a stand against Trumpism. They have. It is interesting to note that they haven't suffered any real significant, debilitating consequences from doing so. Canada's got some in that they can't export stuff to the US as freely as what they used to, but then Canada also has control over some of the energy supplies to Washington State and other places, so they can control some of that. But the point is that they're not afraid of the United States. And that's what interests me, is that if you're fearful of somebody, the person that you're fearful of has so much more power than you. And we must learn that fear is unfounded. I guess what we think of when we think of the United States is the type of power they have had. We don't start to think of the type of power they would not have if we invest elsewhere in the world. To me, that is what's vitally important. I see scenes, Anne, thanks Anne, that's a good one. Scenes of happy faces at the China summit. Does that come up? Yeah, scenes of happy faces at the China summit. Yeah, and why wouldn't they be? Suddenly, now I probably look. I do have an issue with the fact that I have an issue with, I guess, the fact that Putin and China and each other's hip pockets. That China and India will buy oil off Russia so that they're not going to be punished for what they're doing in Ukraine, and China will be supplying arms to Russia. I'm quite sure that all happens. And maybe at the end of the day, even troops, who knows, it's going to do the North Korean thing. But it is an interesting lesson, isn't it? So... And Dee's put something out there which reminded me too, that Trump's absence was a symbol of his failure. How true? How true is that? Whoops, wrong one. Get rid of that. Try again. Yes, and Trump's absence was a symbol of his failure. If you're gonna present an image of a strongman, and that image is based on your physical appearance, like we have Putin riding a horse, topless. He looks old and flabby, to be quite honest. But anyway, this is the appearance he wants to give of himself. He's a martial artist. He's a ex-KGB, and this is what Trump desperately wants to look like, and the Trump wants to, he still wants and craves for, and attempted to have that big rally whereby the soldiers marched by him, as they do in North Korea and Russia and China. That's what he wants. He wants the appearance. That being and appearing strong and powerful and all that sort of stuff. That's why he's invading Washington, D.C. and California and doing those other things, because this is what he believes makes himself look powerful. This is important to him. But if you're weak-bodied and weak-minded, which he is, then when your health fails, don't you just look like a con man, the con man he is? You've thought about that for weeks now they've been showing the stuff on his hands. Now the stuff on his hands I understand, because as an older person I get bruising on my hand if I knock it or something, because I've got very thin-skinned. I think the older you get, the thinner your skin gets. But So I understand that, no big deal. But the fact that he has gout, which is the problem with fluid flowing to the bottom to his legs and the circulation not working as it should be, is an indication that the man's failing in health. Now, when you're failing, when you want to be a strong man, like Putin with his top off, whatever, and you want to be powerful, but your health is failing, and you're looking as if you're weak and particularly vulnerable, I wonder what that does to your sense of self, your ego, for example. I wonder how it causes it to deteriorate. Anne, thanks for this comment too. I'm just going to put this one up if I can get this to work again. Whoops, that's Steve, get rid of her. A new global order is coming and not fast enough. The US is destroying humanity regardless of who is president. So true, and what we could refer to there specifically is USAID, and how I heard the guys on the Rest of Politics talking about that yesterday, and how that has destroyed the soft power that the United States did have, and how important it was for them to build that post Vietnam War in particular, and now that has completely been eroded away, and that it is sad to see that this power and influence the United States has had has now diminished to almost nothing. I want to thank everybody. So I've been chatting for 47 minutes, which is 7 minutes longer than I normally do. If you've got any other comments you want to make and want to talk about, if you've got, can I please just remember to subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications, and so on. It is important for me to increase my subscriptions. My goal, I'm at 6,000 plus subscriptions now. My goal is to have 10,000 by the end of the year, and it would be great if you could contribute to those, because I know that most people that watch my channel are people who simply see my videos on their YouTube feed, click on it because they think the topic's interesting or whatever, or just curious, and then they disappear. 90% of my people, 90% of the people that click on that give me views are those people. If 90% of those people subscribed, it would be fabulous. I've had over 500,000 views. And I know they're repeat views, some of those, but if even half of those people have subscribed, it would be a great benefit to myself and my family. So please do. JGB says Bernie Sanders and his fight. I'll bring that up if I can. Bernie Sanders and his fight against oligarchy is very interesting. It is. In fact, thanks for raising that. That he also had a massive rally, unbelievable rally, in, I forget where it was, the other day, Arlington. Anyway, in this rally, he had a massive stadium which must have seated 30,000, 40,000 people, and it was packed. And one needs to be asking the question, what is there about Bernie Sanders and his fight against oligarchy that's receiving the accolades and the attendances that they are? One of the things that I think we need to celebrate here in Australia is that we are far from being where they are in the US. So Barron says, sorry mate, I got distracted when I saw that. Your poor mum and dad, my God. How sad is that? I make my mum and dad watch you when they come to visit, counteract the Sky News they force feed themselves with. I love it, man. You're a gem, Barron. Thank you very much. Just get them to subscribe on YouTube, if you wouldn't mind. Would be really, really helpful. Jumpy's a failure. Sure is a master of taking down the US, though. Yes, he is. So let me know. I still continue the conversation about, because many people will log on after this live feed is finished. So let me know what other thoughts you might have around the immigration issue, which is the one I raised to start with. Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, I believe, tomorrow or the following day, our time anyway, is going to give a press conference, which is going to be a statement that he's alive, which is sad in itself that he has to do that. But also, again, please subscribe to my channel, ring the bell. I really would appreciate that. I need to remind you that subscribing to my channel doesn't cost you anything. So please do. So thanks everybody for coming online. Nearly 100 people have viewed this video so far. I really do appreciate it. In the meantime, keep the conversation going. Let me know what you think. I'll check the comments later as well. Thanks for being here. Take care. Look after yourselves. And more importantly, be safe.